stand on the terraces at the old Hyde Road, so I got a little bit of affection for Bellevue going past to my school days. That the original intention tonight was that we would, the riders and the different people here would sit on the stage, but obviously, and they would be interviewed by the Bellevue announcer, who unfortunately can't be here. So I've been asked by Rob if I'll sort of do a little bit of the MC. And what I thought is that I think probably most people here really want to learn something about the other Ivan Major. Not the Ivan Major that you've heard about of his statistical achievements and his fantastic racing record, but what he was like. So what I'm going to do, after we've introduced the various people, is to ask all the people here, if you've got a question, please ask the question and we'll try and get it answered. It can be anything. If you want to know what coloured socks Ivan used to wear, then we'll find a man who'll give you an answer. And I hope you agree that that is a nice way, so that you maybe some of you had a question you've wanted to ask for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. This is your chance. So you don't go away tonight saying, oh, I wish I'd asked that question. But let us introduce them, and again, it's probably best if they stand up so that we can introduce you to everybody. I think the first person has to be the man amongst all of us who knew Ivan better than anyone, spent more hours with him, slept with him, slept in the same hotel as him, time after time after time. His former long-serving, incredibly long-serving, loyal mechanic, Gordon Stokes. I'll just ask Gordon, maybe two questions, and then we'll introduce everybody else and then start the questioning from the floor. And then Gordon can go home, as he says. He's lucky because he's the one that lives closest. Can I first of all ask you, Gordon, how did you become Ivan's mechanic?
Started off at Newcastle, and then when he came to Bellevue in '69, he used to come down every week on the motorbike and help Ivan go back after the meeting, go to work the next morning. And I done that 4 years, and then eventually he asked us to become full-time mechanic.
At that time, you were still living in Newcastle, weren't you?
Yeah.
When he asked you, so what did you do?
I used to come down here, and then 1974, he was up and said, can you come and work out? So I asked my wife.
Margaret?
Yeah.
Give everybody away, because if Gordon was loyal, one reason that he was loyal.
Because you got on so well.
Give us a wave.
Yeah, and when he was up, I said, I'd like to see Margaret, see what she said. She said, if you don't go, you'll regret it for the rest of your life.
And you would have done. And I'm sure you, many, many times, you turned around and said it was one of the best decisions, if not the best decision you ever made.
Definitely. That was it.
Okay, thank you, Gordon, and we may get questions from you. I think you can all see from that, how loyal Gordon was over. He was just a constant in Ivan's life. Once he came back in '63, that before, in the 50s, the late 50s, Ivan and the family were actually based in London and stayed with a family called the Home family, Jim and Reenie Home. And it was when he came back to Manchester, when Mike Parker brought him back. I think Brian said earlier that Mike Parker provided him with accommodation. You might call it accommodation, but if you'd seen the state of the houses that Mike Parker owned in Moss Side, and they really were, they were made into homes by people like Ray and the wives of some of the other riders, the New Zealanders and the Australians who lived there, but they certainly weren't palaces. And if anyone thinks that Ivan and a lot of the other people like Jim Airy, Lake and Glasgow, if anyone thinks, well, they had it easy when they came over, they certainly didn't, because they lived in trying circumstances, and it really was difficult. I always remember the first time I ever met Ivan, which I can't, when I say I remember, I can't remember where it was, but I was only 18 at the time, and for some reason we got on particularly well. I was living in Diggs at the time in a little village called Harlesike, close to Burnley. And Ivan's wife, Ray, sort of said, do you want to come over for Sunday lunch? So living in Diggs, absolutely jumped at the chance. I arrived for Sunday lunch and was totally amazed because the Sunday lunch that she served up was a curry. I don't even know if I'd ever had a curry in my life, but this gorgeous Sunday lunch was a curry. And that was typical of Ray and Ivan. They hadn't known me before that, but we just struck it off and fortunately remained friends the rest of our lives and still are friends with the family. There were two other people who played a part in those early days, a little bit later, that I'd like to view. There's Norrie Allen, who again became a joint, we worked in the pits crew with Ivan. Norrie, do you want to come and make yourself known? Yeah. Norrie is another who knows all the secrets. I'll ask you the same question as Gordon. How did you come to get to know and work with Ivan?
Well, I was about this size, and there was a rider staying at McRan's and he fractured his skull. I think it was 63 or 64, and Ivan come up to visit him to see how he was, and I liked Dougie Temple better than Ivan Major, to be honest with you. So that's how I got to know him, and then my brother done some sponsorship deal with him, and 78, Ivan phoned up and said, would I like to work for him? And I've come down, done a couple of days, went back to Edinburgh, and handed him a notice. And then that's it, history.
Thank you. I think that again illustrates the sort of personality that Ivan had, that there are two people who gave up living where they were living to travel down and live in Manchester, which is an amazing tribute, not only to them, but to the security they felt with Ivan, particularly if you look around today. You look in the pits at the Grand Prix, and the mechanics change almost every round, and certainly not every round, every year. And you always read riders saying, oh, I'm changing all my pits crew. Ivan never did. He kept the same people.
Yeah, well, God, look how long Gordon worked for him, and I done 8 seasons with him. So, yeah, so good to work for, it really was. Really looked after you good.
In what way did he look after you, Norrie?
Yeah, that's my brother. I don't know, it just made you feel important, really made you feel part of it. And maybe good manipulator. So, yeah, I can't speak highly enough of him. I wouldn't have what I've got now if it wasn't for Ivan. So,
That's a great tribute, isn't it? Thank you, sir.
And I would do the same again.
Ah, there we are. I think that all of us who knew Ivan certainly would have the time over again, because he was an astonishingly loyal person. You know, the friends that he had in his later life, the friends that the family have now, are the friends that he had, you know, in my case, 1963, Gordon's case, 1963, Norrie's, 78, you know, and that is the full story of Ivan. You know, he's still in touch with the home family, which is now the son and the grandson. You know, literally the family is still in touch, but for his poor health at the moment, you know, Jim Hone, who was the son of Sid and Reenie, you know, Jim would have been here, and so would Steve Hone, who I think some of you will have heard as a photographer, like Steve was the grandson. So that is all part of the family, and every time the family came over, the Majors would visit them. Like I have a very personal story to say that some of you may know that my wife Pam had a devastating stroke in 2010 and was disabled for the rest of her life till she sadly passed away in May. But Ivan and Ray came over from Australia to visit her when she was on the first week she was out of hospital, so that we could all go out for a meal together. You know, and that is the sort of friendship you can't buy and you will never ever forget in your life. And I'm sure, you know, each of us here who were associated with him will have a similar story, perhaps not quite of the same importance to you, but it always happened, there were things like that. Can I ask now Ronnie Allen, the brains of the Allen family, who played another important part in Ivan's, what I will call business life.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I'll leave it to you to tell how you associated and with
Right.
him.
Just following up to what Norman said, by the way, I'm the older brother, in case you're confused. Yeah, when I first met Ivan, it was my grandmother's house, and he came off, and he had been invited by Ian Hoskins to do some match races against some of the top Edinburgh riders. And when he heard I was a bike pusher, he said, now tell me about some of the riders. Tell me about Dougie Templeton. And Jim McMillan's here, that's his uncle. I said, well, Dougie's a farmer, and he's a strong man. And if he makes the gate, and his left leg gets over your front wheel going into the bend, forget about it. You're never going to pass him. He will make sure you don't pass him by fair or foul means. From then on, Ivan said, you know, he stayed at my mum and dad's house, he stayed at my grandmother's house, he stayed at my auntie and uncle's house, and it was just family friends. And one thing about Ivan, going back all these years, if he trusted you as a friend, you were a friend for life. And he had a certain technique, a magic about it, that he was a good boy, he was a good lad. But on the other hand, I can tell you, when he came, the last time he came to the house, my house in Somerset, Ray, Norman, my late wife, Ivan, we all went out for a curry, and then we decided we'd watch the Grand Prix. Came back, Grand Prix, and we decided we'd have a drink or two. A drink or two. We got tanked into the Jack Daniels and Coke. So we all went to bed about 1:30, and quite mellow. Next morning, he came down, and he said to my wife, Linda, that husband of yours is a menace. Linda said, what do you mean? He said, well, he made me drink these Jack Daniels and Coke, and that's why I'm feeling so bad. But that was Ivan. He always had an answer. Now, do you want me to tell you one? The other one?
Yes, please.
I've done 30 odd years as a referee, for good and bad, and I only refereed Ivan once. And Peter was promoter, and Ivan was only riding in home matches. And I'm sure some of you have been to Exeter, and the referee's box in Exeter, you can virtually lean out and touch the rider in gate 4. Well, Ivan was in gate 4. He came up to the tapes, did his digging and what have you. And as a referee, you press the green light and then you move your finger to the tape release. So there's a little pause. So he comes up and he's digging and press the green light. And before I could get my finger off the green light, he was through the tapes. It was like a bride's car. The ribbons were waving all over the place. I thought, all right, red light's on, red light exclusion. Peter comes on. You're going to ruin the meeting. We need the points. We're bottom of the league. Change your mind. I said, Peter, you know better. I've never changed my mind as a referee. Then Ivan came on. Ronnie, you can't exclude me. I said, I'm excluding you. You're out. He said, no, you can. We've been pals for life. We used to come on holiday. We used to go to Buxton, go over to Guy Arnold's place. I even bought you ice cream. I said, sorry mate, you're still out. So we got through the meeting. And as he was walking across the centre green back to the dressing rooms, the fans there, well, they were really giving me stick. And they knew I was from Scotland. They were saying, send that Scottish bee back over the border. We don't want to see him again. He's a crap referee and all this sort of thing. And I was thinking, oh my God, I've ruined the friendship. This is terrible. And he stopped in front of the box and I thought he was going to give me a volley. He just went, good decision. And that was it. So he was a fair man. But we had lots of time, good times, especially when I worked in the drinks industry. And I was marketing manager for a number of big brands, one of them being Ricard, which is a French aniseed drink. And I thought, one way or another, I am going to sponsor Ivan Mauger. I was in charge of the budgets, it was dead easy. So we did a deal, and he came in front of all the directors with big boards, with all the Ricard logos all over leathers, bike covers, everything. And he was impressive. And we did a deal for 3 years. It was the biggest cash deal in Speedway ever. And I had to say one thing. When I was dealing with the French, he wasn't Ivan Mauger. When I was dealing with the French, it was Ivan Mauger. And we used to chuck up. I used to say, excuse me, Monsieur Mauger. And he used to say, shut up, I don't want any of that nonsense. So, yeah, as part of the deal, he was given a week's holiday on the private island in the south of France. And it just so happened I could sort of manipulate a few days down there myself. And one time he said, you know, who's signing all these bills? I said, just sign the bills and don't worry about it. He says, but who's passing the bills? I said, well, I pass them. He says, well, that's very good. So we did have lobster and we did have champagne. And we looked bloody well over 2 weeks. So I can't say enough about Ivan. He's been a great mate, a good friend. We've had lots of fun, and I even rode at Hyde Road in the car park his first Jap that he won his first World Championship. I had his helmet on, and a sweater, jeans, and ordinary shoes. I didn't even have a steel shoe, but at least I've ridden the World Champion. Thank you very much.
Well done.
Ronnie is, you mentioned a world champion, that we have a world champion with us tonight who we'll be talking to a little bit later, because he's a man who again knew Ivan intimately. I think we all sort of welcome 1976 world champion Peter Collins. Great to have you here, Peter. I think always one of Ivan's greatest attributes as a speedway rider was that he was meticulous in his homework. Ronnie, I'm sorry, I always keep saying Ronnie and Norrie, and Ronnie will probably tell you that this is a true story, that Ivan used to visit the referee's box, usually before meetings if he could, and he'd always sit down exactly where the referee sat, and he would look out at the track, and he knew that at Bellevue the referee couldn't see the rider on gate 4 if he was close to the fence. So Ivan on gate 4 would always go as close to the fence as possible, because in the days when you could roll, he would roll and get the fastest start. He would also know that there was a track where, from the referees high up, you couldn't see the white line on, say, the second turn or the third turn. So he knew that in an emergency he could go over the white line and the referee wouldn't have a clue. He knew how long it normally took a referee to press a button, and even though they probably say they didn't, the majority of referees, just had a system in their head. They'd go 1, 2, button, 1, 2, 3, button, and he knew what the referees would do. And he was very rarely, caught out. That he was on occasions when perhaps the referee sneezed, so he didn't go from his usual system. But that shows the sort of homework he did into every meeting, and he kept everything in his little diaries. He had everything written down. They would tell you what the weather was like, what the temperature was, who the referee was, how he conducted the meeting. He probably, although I'm not certain, told you how good or bad the burgers were after the meeting. That he was also an incredible team man. He was as proud of his team winning as he was of individual glory. He would insist on various clauses or agreement in his contract on how a team was formed, because he never joined a team that he didn't think he could lead to the league championship. And he virtually fulfilled that with every team that he did. I had close involvement with him at Exeter, and the sort of things we would do, we wouldn't sweep out the visitors' pits. So the team, riders would come in, the visiting riders say, what a, excuse the language, heap this place is, and that was deliberate. He, put in, or got us to put in, 20 watt lamps to go, or 30 watt lamps to go in, bulbs to go in instead of 60 in the home side, and various things like that. I always remember, one meeting at Leicester where we decided, at Ivan's behest, that all the riders had to arrive there at a particular time. I think it was one of those important matches that we needed to win to win the league, and that was simply to put the fear of God up the home side, to say, God, they're keen tonight, they must really want to win it. And there were lots of psychological things that he did. I was always a sort of a divining rod for him on different things, and we'd talk about it. And I don't know whether I think it was actually when he returned to Bellevue with Exeter, we put him at number 2 for a knockout cup match. And this absolutely bewildered the Bellevue management. And they couldn't, well, why is Ivan Mauger at number 2? And it was simply something that we talked about, that in the days of tactical substitutes, if he was number 2, we could put him in heat 12 it would have been. And there were things like that we used to do. There was the famous one at Wimbledon, which some people might remember, when it was the only time I had nearly a fist fight with Wally Morton, who was the promoter of Wimbledon. Ivan had mechanical problems. Gordon will remember this one. Had mechanical problems in one race and was due out, I think, in either the next race or the one after that. And they announced over the PA, Ivan Mauger is being replaced in this race by the reserve Jeff Mudge. And Jeff Mudge went out, and Wally Morty, who was eating in the restaurant at Wimbledon, came down into the pits, swore at me and said, "What are you doing? You don't take Ivan Mauger out of a race, you don't do that." But what we knew was that Jeff Mudge went through the tapes. And in those days, if a reserve went through the tapes, the original rider could go back in. And all this did was to give Gordon time to get Ivan's bike ready after the machine failure. And that was the sort of thing that we did and that Ivan encouraged and led to a lot of the success. But he was also so good at helping the teammates, and I'm not sure if he can make his way up here. If not, we'll try and go and talk him. Ken Eyre, who rode with him, I'm sure will have a story or two to tell us. Can you make it, Ken, or Ken?
Exeter, and I do remember one night there, he was on the outside gate, and right under the sign, and it was Rider of the Night final, and I was going back to getting changed, so I'm stood there and I thought I've probably learned something here with these four in. So I'm looking at them, and all of a sudden, revving up, Ivan didn't move, and they excluded him. Somebody did touch the tapes, and that's when you knew when Ivan, if you knew he was right, he was on the ball. Yeah, like you said, he said okay to the referee, that was a good decision. But it wasn't, I was stood there and it wasn't. So he turns his bike and puts it straight across then the track. So the next thing on the tannoy, it's Ivan made you fine £50, which was a lot of money those days. So he pushed his bike onto the grass. So the next thing, he bump started it, did a practice start down this beautiful grass, big deep groove. Ivan made you find another £50. So if I remember, quite a few of will, the pit gates was halfway down the back straight, and he disappeared out through there, and everybody thought, I know what's happening. Next thing, out he comes in his Merc. Oh, it was like stock car racing. He came out, he went round the top bend, absolutely broadside, straight up to the tapes, jumped out, locked it up, looked at me and he said, come on Ken, we're going to get changed. So we're there in the shower, showering away, and the management's there going, please Anne, please come and move it. No, he said, I didn't do anything. He says, teammate here said I didn't. And he was right, and if he knew he was right, that was it. When he was wrong, he was wrong. But that was one thing. There's quite a few things, like I was just saying, technical things he'd do and help us. I remember him coming in after his first ride one night at Bellevue, and we talked about it, one thing and another, and he came in, whipped his back wheel out, he got this message going around, like, oh, get your back wheels out, mess about the thing, and put the same one back in again, the same sprockets. He said, because it's all right out there. And all the opposition changed the gearing. And they were wrong. When they went out, all the gearing was wrong. But I remember, he's smashing really. He was and is my hero. I think he's the greatest thing, that's my opinion, the greatest thing ever happened to Speedway. And I just, to have rode with him, and I remember going to West Ham, it would possibly be 69 early on, and I rode number 2 to him, and it was like, oh my God. And he had a little talk to me beforehand. He said, now look, he said, I want you to make the gate. If you can make the gate, he said, I'll hold you there. He says, hopefully I'm going to be there. And he said, 4 2s win matches. 3 alls, may as well ride all night for 3 alls, and then somebody has an engine failure, whatever, you've lost the match. He says, 4 2s win matches. Don't ever forget that. So it was, I'm sort of there thinking, oh my God, I don't know who it would be. Could it have been Ollie Niagara? I don't know. I understand it's 50 years since I've had a few knocks on the head since then. But I remember I made a good gate. And I'm there, and because Ivan has said, look, if you make it, I've got you there, nobody will come round this first heat tonight. There, they won't get round the outside. So I'm there, and he's got he's got his hand off, waving me under. I'm like hanging on for grim death, and he held me there all the way round. And the race finished, and I'm sort of this young lad, I've just had a 5-1 with Ivan Mauger, which is like, oh my God. And obviously the back straight was full of Bellevue supporters, which I'm one of you now. I'm a Bellevue supporter, and we're all there for Bellevue. And I was an ex-rider, I'm a Bellevue supporter. But I'm like dead chuffed, and I always like to let on to the supporters then, because they were there, they were part of the team. Without supporters, you ain't got Speedway. So I'm like that, and I'm waving away, I got my mask down, waving away. Next thing, I'm flat on my back on the floor. And I'm like, and what I'd done, Ivan had stopped to do a practice start, and I clipped his back wheel. So I'm late, crowd's just going ballistic, and I'm just, Ivan's like looking down and shaking his head. But I knew him sort of personally as well, because he used to invite us for parties at his house, and the family, just lovely family. I mean, Ray was brilliant with all the other wives. She didn't take advantage of any. She sat with the wives. She was brilliant. She's a really lovely family. But yeah, so Ivan would get the old jungle juice going and mix it, bang a banana, and goodness knows what else went. But it was a bit. I think he could have run the bike on it. But it was early days. I mean, actually, me and Eric Broadbelt were at Bellevue every year that Ivan was there. So we're both very privileged to be like that. And he always, if we got choice of gate, this is the man he was. No other top rider had ever done it. He just said, "What gate do you want?" I said, "What do you mean? That's bloody crap out there." And he said, "Are you better off that one?" I said, "Well, yeah, but you know, you're number one." And he said, "Look," so I remember one night, I said, "Why do you give me choice of gate?" And he said, "When I go to a world final," he said, "do you think they're going to give me every gate I want?" He says, "I'll have to have the gate I'm given. And this, I can practice the league matches to win world finals, because I can start off every gate." And I thought, wow, he just went up in my... Yeah, it was just unbelievable. And we'd, like you were saying about tactics, we'd get in the changing rooms, and he'd say, "Look, he's peeing down out there, track's horrible, they're sat out there in freezing cold because we've not put coal in their fire, and it's they don't want to ride. So come on, lads, smile on his face, march out there, have a laugh, do that. The beat before we even get out there, you know." But another story I've got, my son Toby, he's got a pair of handlebars there. Just bring them down, Toad. This is a pair of Ivan Mauger's original handlebars.
Wow.
Right?
Early rental.
Correct. Now, I don't know who knows about rental handlebars.
Gordon does.
Well, he was for packing in. He wasn't going to make them because he had trouble with them. He kept breaking and doing. And I said, if you can make bars, because any rider here will all know that if we just tumbled over, had a bit of a bent, and you had to fit another pair of bars. And I went to Henry Rosenthal and I said, "Look, make me a pair of bars like that for Speedway, they'll take on, because they've got give in them, they're strong." Anyway, one or two of us tried them, including PC, and they didn't work. They broke. Probably people have seen a picture of PC holding his forked leg. I went back to them and said, "Look, they're no good. You need aircraft aluminium tubing." He said, well, we're thinking of packing up, they're not working, this, that, and I said, "Telling you, you get the right alloy and they'll work." So he said, "Well, bring me a pattern then." So brought these, went to see Adam and said, "Look, what do you think? This is what I'm wanting to do." He said, "Sounds good, that." So he gave me them, took them back to Henry, and Henry looked at them and said, "Well, they're no good, they're bent." I said, "Yeah, they're supposed to be like that because we turn left on, and that's how you sit on the bike now, you hold them." So He said, okay. So he looked into it and he got the best aircraft tuning that they use in the wings or something. Well, I mean, you know, when you've been in aircraft, that things are going up and down like that, so it's got to be good, hasn't it? And he made these bars, and I said, look, if you do them, they're right. I said, I'll get you a world champion and a British champion. And I got Ivan on them, and I got Ray Wilson on them. And they both won on them. And from there, I never made a penny out of it. I was a bit, I was Buxton, a bit there. Should have had something signed up, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
But Henry has always supplied me with bars. When I finished up training, he's always sponsored my son in trials, competition stuff. But that is the story of Renthal Bars. They were retiring. So, but yeah, that's my thing about Ivan. He was just so good to ride with. I could go on.
Right.
But you
Thank you.
There's other people, I'm sure.
Now, I've spoken about how good he was with his teammates, but his rivals have a good stories to tell about him. And with us tonight, somebody who rode with Ivan for Great Britain, but rode against him many, many times. Jimmy McMillan, please, Jimmy. So can you tell everyone about them, about your experience of Ivan as a teammate and the stories about your long track?
Yeah, I mean, I never actually raced in the same team as Ivan in league matches, but I did ride in international matches with him because in those days they had Ivan and Barry and some English and a Scotsman in the team. We used to go on tour in Poland and Sweden. And first time I went with him to Sweden, he was always very orientated that the team wins. So it didn't matter which team he was in at the time, whatever team he was in on that day, he was wanting you to win. And if anybody had any trouble needing any spares, he had a big box of spares that he had from Java, and as you say, go and help yourself, lads, if you want something, there's a box here, we've got to win this match, you know. So he was very orientated from that point of view. But in another occasion I was racing, and I did one long track meeting in Denmark, and it was the Tom's Gold Bar meeting, which is one of the biggest long track meetings in the world probably. And it's the first time I'd ever done long track, so I didn't really have my engine set up properly. And I borrowed a frame off Reg Wilson because I didn't have a long track frame. So I went there, and my second race, my bike seized up. So I thought, oh, that's me finished, because I only had one bike with me, you know. So I was talking to Ivan, and I said, my bike's seized up. He says, I'm not going to race. He says, okay, he says, I've got two bikes here. He says, I use that one for the first half of the meeting, and I use that one for the second half of the meeting. He says, you can borrow that one. So that was the kind of person he was. He just lent you the bike, you know, for the rest of the meeting, you know. So he was a wonderful person to be with, and he always looked after you. I mean, I did a tour in Australia, New Zealand, and America with him and Brigger's World Tour, and he, you know, if you were in his team, he looked after you. He was a great guy, really. You know. I think he introduced the professionalism into Speedway because the way he was set up, the way his bikes were set up, everybody tried to copy him because he was the one to try and beat, you know, which was very hard indeed. But I think he, as you say about his little book, on another occasion, Ivan was riding Exeter, and he was getting an injection in his elbow, and he couldn't ride at Newport. And Wally Mosley phoned me up and says, can you guess for Ivan at Newport? And I said, well, again, I've had an engine trouble, I'd blown an engine up. He says, oh, that's okay. He says, we'll send Ivan's bike down with Trevor. His brother will come and bring it down. So Norrie and Gordon were involved in that. So this Trevor arrives with a bike at Newport, and he got his little book out. He said, he's looking at the track and the weather. He says, well, we put this gear on. I said, okay. So he puts that gear on, and we goes, I'm racing, and I beat Phil Crump on it. And halfway through the meeting, he said, oh, we changed gear now. He said, it says in the book we changed. I said, okay, I can't. So he changed the gear. And I had a really good meeting on it, you know. So it just shows you his little book definitely paid dividends in that day.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Okay.
I think some of Jimmy's stories there do show the other side of Ivan, because a lot of people think that he was just very self-centered, but he wasn't. He was team-orientated more than anything. We were talking about a world champion, and he probably knows as much about Ivan, and he will tell you Ivan's influence, if there was any, on his own career. PC. You okay standing?
Yeah. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Peter. Yeah, right. Well, tell us a story. What was it like when you first came?
Right, yeah, well, Ivan was a bit instrumental in getting me to Bellevue because I went to the usual training schools in 1971, and then Tolliver was the manager there that ran the training schools. And often Ivan would come down on a Saturday and look what was going on. And Ivan insisted that Dent should sign me for the team for the following season, which is what happened. But at the time, Ivan had all his sponsorship from Jawa, and he had the most fantastic bikes and parts and stuff that came from the Jawa factory. I know Gordon used to go, often Norrie took over, they used to go to Prague to the factory in the winter time and come back with a van load of gear. So Ivan always had the good stuff. And it's very important really that you've got the best bikes and that, because races are won in the workshop as well as on the track. And Ivan basically, riding with Ivan, I was always sort of next to him in the pits and that, and I could see what was going on all the time. So, unbeknownst to Ivan, I was learning lots of stuff from him. And then one night at Wolverhampton, we needed to win this last race for us to win the meeting at Wolverhampton, and my bike was playing up, so Ivan says, "Oh, jump on my bike." So I jumped on Ivan's bike and won the race by a mile. And then from then on, I'd got Kyle at doing my engines, and the bikes that I was building were virtually identical to what Ivan was riding. So I had the best gear because I knew that was so instrumental in winning anything. But yeah, Ivan was the ultimate professional because everything he did was, like you said, Jimmy Mack said he had all these things in his book that he used to write down about stuff that he used on the track and that. But I kind of didn't do that because I hadn't got enough time to do that. I was riding that often that I didn't end up doing all that writing in the workshop. The main thing with me was trying to catch up on my sleep because I was always on the road. I could sweep the sink and the washing behind me. I've slept in a wardrobe and all sorts of stuff.
How much change do you think Ivan made to Speedway? Did he influence all the riders of his era?
Yeah, he absolutely influenced everybody riding Speedway. Because in the early days, you'd turn up at meetings and be some of the old boys that had been riding for years and years that never prepared the bikes or even cleaned them, in fact. All they used to do was perhaps kick the bike with a steel chute and see how much dirt dropped off it, and then ride it again in the next meeting. And they didn't sort of spend time looking at tyres because, tyres were a big important thing on, whether you won or you didn't. But, Ivan was so serious, and of course, I think, too much, he gave Ollie Olsen far too much information, and that's why Ollie ended up being as good as he was, because he got all that information off Ivan when they were both at Newcastle.
I don't think you can have a better tribute to a rider than that, can you? Thanks, PC. We'll go on to asking for questions now from...
Yeah, just one other thing.
Yeah, one second.
Yeah, no, often, Ivan and I used to go into do big long track meetings all over Europe and stuff. And often I can remember having some heated conversation with him about the fact that, you know, he always reckoned that he should have won the World Final in '76. And I used to, you know, we'd be arguing by the time the night had gone, sat at a table after a meal with a couple of beers or something. And Ivan never used to drink in the early days at all, but we were sat there having some beers. And he used to say to me, I would have won '76 if my bike hadn't have stopped. And I used to say to him, Ivan, there's no way in the world you were going to beat me there, because my bike was far superior to everybody else's. And he'd go quiet and walk off. But, you know, those are the sort of things Ivan and I often spoke about this. And I think he honestly believed that he was going to beat me, but I knew he wasn't.
Well, I think anyone who saw it will agree that PC was his own man who won that World Final on absolute merit. PC, one of the greatest riders England has produced over the years. But can I start then? Who's going to start us off with the first question to be answered?
Stadium across the road. It was called Brent's Cafe, and who turns up? Ivan, who was the manager at Mauger at the time. And I think PC may have been there, and it felt like it was at God's table. I didn't even say a word, you know what I mean? You just listened. But to be in that company as a young lad, he's dragging into his leg, you know, and I would pay the bill.
For everybody.
For everybody, he didn't even know me or anything. But I was sat next to Ivan, you know what I mean? So I was so quiet. I knew PC obviously, because we've been friends for a long time.
We both paid.
Pardon?
We both paid.
Yes. Yeah. So, honestly, it was like God's table for me. And that was my introduction to Ivan's. Then I went to Ivan's house with his bikes and this, and I was a similar age to Kim. So it was quite funny when he came. And even had a cup of coffee made by Ivan. You know, little things like that, you know what I mean? But, you know, man. But every team we wrote for, like Bellevue, when they went to Exeter and Hull, he thought them to be league champions. And that was Ivan. He brought everyone, you know, to the fore. His influence, the way mindset, might have been the best riders, but he brought the best out of them, like the best of them.
Now the question you got, which I'll ask Norrie if he can answer it.
Oh, Norrie, this is a great question. What I thought about when I first came in. How did Ivan relax? Because he had such a busy lifestyle, and he'd train at Man City, he'd be on the continent, and all the meetings, he had an office, he had sponsorship deals going on and everything. How much time did he have to relax? Because he must have felt burnt out, he must have been superhuman, really.
Nah, I never really got burnt out because he's done all the work.
He delegated. Norrie, he delegated then.
He was always in Germany, skiing.
Oh, yeah, but you know, I've never seen ever pictures of Ivan like in a family group or this the way he's having a beer or anything. I've never ever seen him relax. He was focused. But I thought when PC got into the Bellevue team, Ivan could see that PC would become a threat because he had such natural ability, where Ivan was kind of, he was absolutely bang on with everything, wasn't he?
The machine.
Style.
He was a machine.
It was a machine. Peter, he said it more. But you had the natural ability, but he became a threat, didn't he? Because he could see you were coming up. And then he had to move on, didn't he? And then you became, but you learned so much of Ivan, didn't you?
Through one eye. Ollie got the most attention.
Yes. Yeah, he did. Like you said, Peter, earlier, Ivan told Ollie too much. Didn't he?
Thanks, Bernie. I don't know, should we be taking a short break so people can get your visits to the loo refreshments?
Yeah.
Again from my side of this and Robert's, thanks everybody for attending, it's been incredible. What a show out, honestly. Knowing Ivan as I did over 30, 40 years, I'll tell you now, he'd be blushing tonight, he would be blushing, and he'd be so bloody proud to see you guys here, to see all his former teammates, his engineers, his mechanics, everybody. What a turnout. Rob and I, Annie did Peter, Rose over there, couldn't be more pleased that you've all turned out. Now comes the begging bit. This is your last chance to get your raffle tickets in, please. I promise you there's some fantastic prizes out there, and I hope you'll dig deep for the auction, because there are some amazing prizes in there. Once again, thank you so very, very much for coming. Can't believe this turnout. And thanks to everybody over there. Good old Longsight yet again have done us proud. Thank you again.